Welcome to Springfield Stories, a night of storytelling about our city. I'm Rebecca Lartigue, organizer for this event. I wanted to host this evening because sometimes it seems like the other cities and towns around us get all the good stories told about them. I wanted to celebrate what makes Springfield. And so tonight's 7 presenters offer you something different. Poems and short stories, memoirs and essays that capture a variety of perspectives about our city. Stories about our past, our landmarks, and our hometown heroes. About leaving home and finding home. Stories about what connects us and makes us a community. I want to thank Brian Hale and the wonderful Bing Arts Center for hosting us in this intimate and very welcoming space. Tonight's event is free, but I strongly encourage you to give what you can to the Bing to support its incredible variety of programming for the arts in the region. Pick up a schedule, like the Bing on Facebook, and bring friends with you to all the great upcoming events. Tonight's program is supported by a grant from the Springfield Cultural Council, which is a branch of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, and I am very grateful for their support and proud to be a member of the vibrant Springfield arts community. Our first presenter is Alana Grady. Alana Grady is a proud Springfield resident who has lived in the city her whole life. Though she may someday live somewhere else, Springfield will always be the place she calls home. On most of the days that end in Y, as long as there is a little sunshine, you will find her at Blunt Park. Other days, she is lost somewhere between the shelves of the city's libraries. Alana graduated from Springfield College in May with a degree in English and Social Justice. She currently works in a local preschool where she is developing professional skills such as fitting tiny feet into even tinier shoes, coming up with quick answers to endless questions, and drawing the perfect Ninja Turtle. In her spare time, Alana writes about the people she knows and hopes they won't mind. She's planning to pursue her Master's of Fine Arts in Creative Nonfiction next year. Alana Grady.
Hi, everybody. I originally wrote this as a column for Springfield College's student newspaper, and the title of that column was, "As a City and a College, Springfield Worthy of Pride." I first became aware of my identity as a Springfield citizen when I was 4 years old. Of course, I didn't know it then, but for the first time, I started school and began to get a sense of the community around me. My school was in what was then a primarily Italian neighborhood, and I celebrated what I often call one of my adopted cultures. As I grew older, I began to embrace not just my school community, but also the surrounding businesses and the people with whom I interacted every day, diverse as they were. My classmates and I were fortunate enough to be able to walk on field trips to places like the museums, Symphony Hall, and the Basketball Hall of Fame. Even back then, I was always proud of my city. It was in 8th grade that I got my first impressions of Springfield College. Daily bus rides home from school took me from the city's south end and down Alden Street. The campus, as I remember it then, was everything I thought a college should be, and after transferring there the fall of my junior year, I found it to be even better than I had hoped. The only thing that left me frustrated, however, was the way that I heard many of my peers, hardworking, intelligent, and passionate people, talk about the city of Springfield. Almost every day I heard generalizations made about a city in which I've lived my entire life. Any loud noise was often followed by the phrase, "probably a gunshot," which practically became a cliche. I heard, "I don't want to get shot," more times than I could count as a reason for students not wanting to leave campus. A few times I was asked, "So if you're from Springfield, how many people do you know who've been stabbed?" I found that news stories of crimes were sensationalized and relayed by some students as if the number of crimes committed in the city was some sort of accomplishment. Either that or the statistics were viewed with complete nonchalance. Violence in Springfield? Typical. What made me most uncomfortable, though, was the way I heard the city spoken about when I was out in the community with other students. Several times I was embarrassed by the people around me who criticized the appearances of the buildings, made judgments and assumptions about the people they saw, and said things like, "I hope we don't get caught in a drive-by," or "There's probably a drug deal going on right here." Now that I have graduated and begun working, I am realizing that these sorts of attitudes are not just found in the conversations of college students who before I had just given the benefit of the doubt of being a little bit sheltered or preoccupied with other thoughts. To my disbelief and disappointment, I've heard the same kinds of statements and worse from knowledgeable adults in professional settings. To give a recent example, one of my coworkers recently said to me that walking down Main Street at noon is an act of bravery because of the people who live here. When I tried to disprove or dispel some of the negative statements I hear people make about Springfield, I often hear, "Yeah, but you're not from actual Springfield," or "Yeah, but you're different." I don't like what either of these responses implies. Statements like these make me an exception, but to what rule? Where is the comparison? To those who live or work in Springfield but are not native to the city, who try to separate themselves by using an us versus them mentality, are dangerously close to othering an entire population of people, the city's residents, and establishing the idea that those who live in Springfield are in some way inferior. This is also true of people in positions of power and influence who use the city's diversity as a false diagnostic for placing blame, fueling harmful stereotypes, and trying to justify a reason behind whatever crime may occur in the city. Determining whose city has more murders per year is a contest that nobody wins, and by saying these things or by using our city's crime rates as bragging rights, I think we're discrediting something that we ourselves are a part of. Those who make these types of comments are showing ignorance to the people whose daily lives are directly affected or are influenced by the city's problems. Those who wear our city's flaws as badges are glorifying that which I think we all work so hard to change. As far as colleges go, my concern is that the way we create hype around crime will discourage prospective students who aren't sure they want to take a risk to further their educations here. I'm afraid that the rumors perpetuated by those who buy into these stories will create unnecessary paranoia that will have an impact on one of the city's greatest assets, its educational institutions. Springfield as a city is often used as a scapegoat to create false tales of overcoming adversity. I cringe when I hear people talking about the city as if it's a war zone, as if it's some sort of personal accomplishment that they survived living here. The truth is that many of the people who express negative views about Springfield have never experienced its violence firsthand and have only benefited from being here. To say that you survived living here may seem like something to take credit for, but statements like that are doing a disservice to the entire city. I'm not saying that we have to sugarcoat things or be dishonest when bad things do happen. My point is that while not everybody may be a native to this city, we should all do our best to look beyond the news that makes headlines and not feed into generalizations for the sake of creating gossip. The comparison between Springfield and actual Springfield is another idea I don't quite understand. I'm okay with the distinction that Springfield at noon is different from Springfield at 2 in the morning, but that can be said about almost anywhere. Avoiding any sort of danger means making smart, safe choices, not using a place's reputation or its demographics as an easy target on which to place the blame for poor decisions. I think it's important that college students, and not just them, but anybody who is a part of the city in any way, to remember that they are not independent of the city. While we are here, we must hold ourselves accountable for our actions and be responsible citizens. Almost 6 months after graduating college, I am working in a preschool 2 blocks down from where, at 4 years old, my school experience first began. Now, at 22, I am redefining for myself what it means to be a part of the Springfield community. This time, I am not a student, but a young professional. Almost every day, I come across some of the examples of the negative verbal culture and ignorance that are embedded in the opinions of some of the people I meet. But at the same time, I am also reminded of where I first developed my own opinions. And I know that I now have the opportunity to let others explore theirs in what will hopefully be a more positive mindset. Whether we choose to accept it or not, the city of Springfield will leave its mark on all of us. There are a lot of people in this city who do wonderful things, and it is my hope that if we preach what we practice, if we promote our positive actions to empower the community instead of speaking out against it, then we can also raise our self-pride and our expectations about what can be accomplished here. It takes a lot of people to make that kind of change, and we're lucky because we have the numbers to do so. After all, a city is not just its neighborhoods, its businesses, or its roads. Springfield is not just 16 acres or 6 corners, Cannon Circle, or Central Street. A city is its people, and this city is all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. Our next reader is Kathleen Andrew. Kathleen Andrew earned a bachelor's degree in English from Trinity College of Vermont and a master's degree in English from Boston College. She taught full-time for many years at Springfield Technical Community College. Although retired, she continues to teach courses in writing, speech, and literature on a part-time basis. Professor Andrew has been a visiting scholar for the Wilbraham Public Library and a contributor of writing to the Springfield Millennium Exhibit in the year 2000. Her community activities have included membership in the Springfield Symphony Chorus. In July 2015, she was given the Outstanding Member Award of the St. Anne Society for her services as an officer. Her favorite quotation is, "One word is worth 1,000 pictures." She feels honored to be invited to participate in the Springfield Stories presentation of poetry and prose, and we're very happy to welcome her.
Okay, thank you, Becky. I couldn't help thinking when Elena was reading about something beautiful in Springfield. That's the bridges. We all go over them, and when the sun hits in the morning or the sunset in the afternoon, they are really something. So when we're on those bridges, though, because we're fighting the traffic, we seldom look at the water. And the history of the Connecticut River is fascinating. Now, my poem, titled The Connecticut River, Centuries and Seasons, is my attempt to remind readers of its history. It's hard for us to imagine a time when barges, flat barges, carried animals and people from one side to another. And then the first bridges, they were pretty shaky, so wouldn't want those. So my poem has 4 stanzas, and it begins by citing an earlier century, the 1700s, and by the end we're up to present day. It also follows the seasons of the year. So the first stanza is spring, then summer, and so forth. Now, so here is the Connecticut River, Centuries and Seasons. Framed by forsythia, the river runs swift and cold. Ripples reflect sunshine. Ferrymen push long poles. Buds of summer plants unfurl. Green borders hold farmers' land. Fishing boats bob and drift. Water and earth are tilled by hand. Horse-drawn trolley cars carry riders from the east side to the west. They see blazing colors along the shore. Time has come for the harvest. Seagulls float on ice floes. 4-lane highways arch the water. The Connecticut River, seabound, flows through the years. Now, in addition to noticing the Connecticut River, we also notice when we're traveling around the clock tower on the campus of Springfield Technical Community College, and of course, that's part of the Springfield Armory. Now, employees at the Armory were very proud of their work. They were skilled at their craft because men and women all were well trained. But more important, they felt that they were serving their country. They were putting reliable weapons into the hands of American soldiers. In 1964, Defense Secretary McNamara came to the Armory and announced that, for budget reasons, the Armory was going to close. Everyone was stunned, but he had spoken, and the operations had to be shut down. Today, we have the Armory Museum located on the campus of STCC, and I truly urge everyone to visit. The displays show an important era in the history of Springfield, and I have brought along brochures, and they are where the refreshments are. So if you have any doubt about what you might see at the museum, please pick them up, because not only is it the weapons, but there's the inventions as well. So I urge you to visit. So here is my tribute to these workers, Touchstones, the Springfield Armory. Like soldiers at attention, rifle barrels stand tall. Meticulous craftsmen created every part, forging and filing and finally assembling a magnificent magazine, each gun a work of art. Time passed and politics ricocheted. New voices called for war and peace. After 174 years of innovative production, work at the Armory was forced to cease. An arsenal of nightmares now guards our soil. Nuclear warheads hold unleashed power. We long to turn back the clock in the tower. Promises of unity are gathering dust. Where are the touchstones of reason and trust? I'm going to conclude my readings by introducing you to an employee of the Armory, Thomas Blanchard. In 1822, he created a lathe. It's now called Blanchard's lathe. And this lathe marked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Before Blanchard created his lathes, objects, including rifles, were made individually by a single person. Then, when one broke, it had to be totally replaced. Blanchard used a technique called tolerance to make replaceable parts. Now, the replaceable parts gave rise to an assembly line. And of course, we know this is more efficient, but it was innovative, and people from other countries came to the Armory to see how this worked. In 1967, with the Armory grounds now empty, Edmund Garvey moved his school, Springfield Technical Institute, to the Armory grounds. He, too, had innovative ideas, welcoming, and we might say tolerating, anyone and everyone was a new concept in higher education. Today, STCC serves over 5,000 students and is a well-respected community college. Here is Tolerance, the Springfield Armory, and STCC. Intolerant of errors, intolerant of fools, Thomas Blanchard created a lathe. Edmund Garvey built a school. Blanchard cut stocks of rifles out of Native American wood. Garvey took aim at ignorance, putting classrooms where Blanchard once stood. At the Armory, all workers were welcome. Race and gender mattered not. With skill, they forged a free country while well-armed soldiers fought. At STCC, grand gates open. A community enters, eager to learn. There is no notice of appearance, physical challenge, or age. After proving house tests, graduates earn a good wage. Tolerance in making a musket means measuring with precision. Tolerance in making a college means modeling the ideals of a nation. The year 2015 is upon us. Lock, stock, and barrel, it's here. Let us pray for tolerance among people that will last for 2,000 more years. Thank you very much.
So our next reader is Doug Bradway. Painter, teacher, graphic designer, photographer, antique dealer, writer. Doug says, quote, "I've always been strange." In school, he specialized in looking out the window and walking backward through puddles. And he's an insatiable reader. He thanks the Springfield Library for always being there for him and many others. Doug.
What a bunch. Harrington's drugstore was on the corner of Princeton and Bay Street. If you're anywhere near my age, the fountain in your neighborhood drugstore would look very much like Harrington's. A soda fountain with a marble counter, tall wooden, metal, decorative chairs, above the counter, 2 brass and mahogany fans that labored to keep us cool. The fountain dispensed different flavored sodas, ice cream sundaes, and banana splits. If you ordered a banana split or a sundae, you'd get the Vichy water for no additional price. Not many of us kids wanted it, free or not. The person working at the fountain was referred to as a soda jerk. I never know why. His shirt sported a black snap-on bow tie. He wore white pants and a jacket, and at his head a white paper hat, I guess to keep his hair out of the ice cream. In the early evening, the older boys, high schoolers all, wearing the popular garb of the times, would hang out in front of Harrington singing in harmony the popular tunes of the day. Of course, they were hoping girls would come strolling by and take notice of them. And of course, they did. Mom sent me to Harrington's drugstore to pick up a copy of the Daily News. How many people remember the Daily News? Huh? As I crossed Princeton Street to return home, I read the headlines. Atomic bomb detonated over Japan. 80,000 dead. I remember running home, tears flowing down my cheeks. I was 11 years old, going on 12 at the time, and had already experienced nearly 5 years of war. The war came to us at the Strand Theater on Eastern Avenue, just around the corner from what was Winchester Square. In the newsreels every Saturday morning, we kids saw bodies strewn on the beaches of France and the beach at Tarawa. We saw flamethrowers burn people out of their shelters. Some tried to run, lit up like torches until they dropped. We saw this. We saw airplanes dropping bombs, our battleships firing their guns. The scariest thing to me was the newsreel showing dead Marines, their bodies rolling back and forth, in the surf on one of those Pacific beachheads. Its name, long forgotten, but not those Marines. We saw all the heroic films. We saw all the gold star banners and the silver star banners in our neighborhood, and we knew what they meant. Still, we played at war every day after school, and the drawings the boys made at school were filled with planes dropping bombs and planes firing at one another. Later, not too much later, when we were older, my generation marched off to Korea. And there's one little short piece. For the kids in my neighborhood, our main street ran from the corner of Bay and Princeton Street to the corner of Sherman and Bay. Just around the corner on Princeton, there was a Stop and Shop, a precursor to the modern supermarkets, in fact. Stop and Shop is going strong even today, with grocery stores all over. One day, I lost my place. One day, my mom sent me to the Stop and Shop to buy a cut-up chicken. And you cut up the chicken, wrapped it in a piece of chicken juice-proof paper, and tied a piece of string around it that you pulled down from a dispenser mounted high above the countertop. Everything went fine until my mom opened the package and she saw it. It's got 3 legs, she said. I looked at the chicken. It has 3 legs. I was amazed. Should I bring the other leg back to the butcher? I said. No, Mom said. We'll keep it and show it to your dad when he comes home. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Our next reader is Nancy Erbschat. Once upon a time in a land far, far away, there was a young college student. She thought she wanted to become a journalist until she learned that the journalism department was across the river and she would have to take a bus to class. So she decided to major in English. Very wise choice. Seemingly simple things could and have altered the course of a day, a year, her life. Her 30-year career at TSM Design was precipitated by her agreement to take on a role that was at the bottom end of the MBA pay grade. But as she's reminded her 2 daughters, ages 35 and 29, throughout their lives, you never know what opportunity is going to look like. Fortunately for her, she was and is loved and supported by an unwavering husband. Together, they live in Springfield, Massachusetts, awaiting the birth of their first grandchild, compliments of kid number 1, and the pending marriage of kid number 2, Nancy.
This is reminiscent of the time that I decided, foolishly, to participate in a recital for the community music school at Barnes & Noble. And when I started, I can't help telling this story because I lost control of my right hand and it was flopping on the, so if you see my hand flopping, it's a habit. My story begins 30 years ago when my husband, our 3.5-year-old daughter, and I moved to Western Massachusetts. My husband's new employer brought us to the area to go house hunting with a realtor. We had 4 days to find a place to live, which was going to be the place we were going to live seemingly for the rest of our lives. Given that we were first-time home buyers, the realtor showed us starter homes throughout Greater Springfield. Ultimately, we settled on one that reminded me of my paternal grandmother's house in Ohio. I think it was the bathroom tile floor that really pushed me over the edge. A month later, we moved into our new home. Turns out we had landed in Longmeadow. We had unknowingly moved from a major Midwestern city to a town referenced in the Preppy Handbook. I remember our daughter's first preschool friend, Rebecca. Apparently, Rebecca thought we were a family of lumberjacks. I guess our relaxing at-home attire, jeans and flannel shirts, threw her for a loop. I remember a question posed by the realtor during the sales process. She wanted to check in and make sure it was okay that our new home was next door to the ABC house. We asked, what does that mean? And she told us it was a program for academically talented inner-city kids who came to high-performing suburban high schools like Longmeadow. We said, of course, we would love to live next door to bright high school students who might potentially be excellent babysitters. The ABC house and its occupants proved to be fantastic neighbors, and the guys were great babysitters. Our home and our new neighbors were a great fit. Fast forward 20 years. Our kids were grown and either off to or out of college, and I decided it was time to move back to the city, in this case, to Springfield. Over the course of my career life, I'd met a number of people who lived in the city, and they all seemed to have this sense of community, with a capital C, and I wanted some of that. Plus, it was my turn to make a major life decision, so we packed up and moved to Springfield. Okay, I can see it on your faces. You've been thinking, wait a minute, aren't we here to hear stories about Springfield? Enter Springfield, and the main character of my story, Bonnie. Bonnie was a homeless woman who used to sit cross-legged on Main Street and ask for money. She had two distinctive features. One was her American flag bandana. The other was her smoky voice that she never raised beyond a whisper. Got some change? She would ask, barely audible. The first time I said, no. The second time I said, no, but I'll buy you coffee. To which she replied, I don't drink coffee, in her smoky voice. I messed up. What do you think? Or what do you drink? I asked. I drink Coke. At that time, she was sitting to the left of the subway on Main Street, so I went inside and I bought her a bottle of Coke, and thus marked the end of our encounter. Naturally, this story repeated itself a number of times over the course of a year or two. Same drill, no change, I'll buy you a Coke. Early one day, though, I was driving down Main Street from my home on Fort Pleasant Avenue. I wasn't very far into the South End when I saw Bonnie sitting in the middle of the street with her shopping cart. I turned down the side street and rushed over to find out what was going on. She was crying. Actually, it was more like sobbing, her shoulders heaving. I asked what was wrong. All of my bags have holes in them. Everything is falling apart. I assured her we could make the situation better. I turned my head to examine the cart, and then she was gone, nowhere to be seen. So there I was, in the middle of Main Street, dressed to the nines, melon-colored coat, patterned tights, great handbag, pushing Bonnie's cart. Naturally, there were no curb cuts to be found. So I pushed the cart up about a block until the curb cut miraculously and mercifully appeared. Still no Bonnie. So there I stood on the street corner with all of Bonnie's earthly belongings. I couldn't leave, but I sure as hell didn't want to stay. A few minutes later, Bonnie appeared with fresh trash bags. I asked, where did you get those? She smiled but didn't answer. Together we started repacking her stuff in the new bags. I opened what was left of one bag to find a liter bottle of gin, or was it vodka, hiding under another bag. I said, you're going to have to figure out what to do with this. Bonnie informed me she was merely holding the bottle for a dear friend. We finished packing up her stuff. I told her not to sit in the middle of any streets anymore, and off she went. Then I started walking back to my car. At one point during my interaction with Bonnie, I had noticed there was a man standing outside an apartment building watching on. He was still there. He finally decided to speak. Nice shoes. And then I went to the office.
Thank you, Nancy. Our next reader is Rick Parr. Rick moved to Springfield when he was 6 and has lived in the area off and on, but mostly on, since then. He graduated from Springfield College and has taught psychology there since 1986. He has 2 grown kids and was recently told he would be a grandfather this coming spring. Congratulations, Rick.
Thank you, Becky. And it's bright up here. And he was right. Yeah. This is called Crossroads at the Christ House of Rest. The first time I was arrested was on the Vietnam Moratorium Day, Wednesday, October 15th, 1969. A day before my 19th birthday and 3 days after the fall baseball season, and what turned out to be my baseball career, both ended at a tournament at Yale. That day, all across America, schools went on strike to protest the Vietnam War, and in Springfield, each of the 3 colleges held quiet, almost prayerful services on their campuses. Later again, quietly, we all joined together and marched down State Street to Court Square to hear the featured speaker, the daughter of Wayne Morse, one of 2 senators to vote against the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, the act of Congress that got America officially into the big muddy of Vietnam. And the place was packed. Sharing the stage were 2 other people, a local middle-aged woman and a young red-haired college dropout from Williams, both of whom were in the midst of organizing poor people into something called the National Welfare Rights Organization. A year later, that group would change its name to Acorn, and 40 years after that, the young kid, Wade Rathke, would be Fox News' poster boy for all things wrong in America. Rathke's partner, Barbara Rivera, mother to the future state representative Cheryl Rivera, was loud and passionate and turned a rather solemn crowd into a chanting mass who was as angry about welfare mothers not getting their checks on time as they were about bombs being dropped on Hanoi. Back on the march back up State Street to Winchester Square, now Mason Square, in a teach-in for peace at Hope Church, we passed the welfare office, and somebody, probably Rathke, had the idea that we ought to liberate it. Liberate it from what he did not say. So a dozen of us peeled off from the protest, walked into the building, told everyone to leave, which they happily did, and then stood there looking at each other, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. We worked hard to look strong and brave and fearless, but inside we, or at least I, was wishing and hoping that someone with real courage would say, "I'm done, let's just go home." But no one did. So after about a half hour and a warning to leave, the police broke down the doors, stormed in, and arrested us. As we were dragged out of the building, a full-fledged riot flashed as bricks and stones and Molotov cocktails were thrown at our paddy wagon. Loud crashes and the smell of smoke made me want to be in jail, where at least it would be safe, which wasn't exactly the case. At the old York Street Jail, the last place in Massachusetts where an execution by hanging was held, we were fingerprinted and booked 2 at a time, and I and my partner, a gigantic shot putter from Columbia named Louis, were told to give up our belts and shoelaces. The police told Louis to hand over his glasses, and he said very quietly, because as large as he was as gentle as he was, "I need my glasses to see." To which the police replied, "Fuck you, asshole," ran him headfirst into a brick wall, and Louis bled. Stunned, I was escorted to my tiny jail cell, where I was welcomed by a magnificently drawn picture of a 5-foot-tall, throbbing, vein-laced cock. Until we were bailed out, I did push-ups and sit-ups to keep from going nuts. We all went to court the next morning, and this being the 60s and that particular day being the day of my birth, my friends in the courtroom serenaded me with "Happy Birthday," which brought the judge storming out of his chambers, pounding his gavel and bellowing, "This is a court of law. This is not a circus. I will clear the courtroom. You will go back to jail." And Christ, I did not want to go back to jail. My second arrest happened the next night, Friday. When 4 friends I had been arrested with, all very large and strong black guys, thought we ought to have a meeting off campus to talk about lawyers. We were caught breaking the citywide dusk to dawn curfew that was imposed because of the riot we'd started the day before. And until that moment, we all thought we were invincible, but being thrown face down on the pavement on a pitch-dark Walnut Street in the middle of 6 corners, kicked into a spread eagle position, fingers interlocked behind our heads, police revolvers stuck in our backs, I began to think maybe it was better to be invisible. A little while later, after the baseball coach stopped talking to me and I became confused and miserable, all I ever really wanted to be was a baseball player. I quit school, got a job in a factory, met a girl, argued with her father about the war. If you think you can do any better, maybe you should run for office. So I did. I took out papers and ran for school committee in my town. The election was held the same day as the first Ali Frazier fight. Ali lost. I lost. I got 9 votes more than my draft lottery number. I was 20, and my first ever vote was for myself, which I liked. In the morning, I drove west with 2 friends. March 1971, just a little while later. I'm sitting on the corner of my cot at the Christ House of Rest men's homeless shelter in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The cots are head to toe, wall to wall, in rows about 3 feet apart. The lights are too bright, and there's a steady flow of Jesus music over the loudspeakers. Except for the crosses, the walls are bare. It's dark outside, cold too, and slumped men stumble down the basement steps looking at the tickets in their hands to see which identical army cot will be theirs for the night. The air is clean because we can't smoke in here. I want a cigarette. Everyone wants a cigarette. Rice and beans will be served in an hour. Cream of wheat comes in the morning. Chip and Tony and I are on an adventure. For the past few nights, we stayed with a woman in Oklahoma who opened her home to kids needing a place to stay. We thought this would work this way all across America, And for the rest of the trip across America, it will. But on this raw night in mid-March, not a single person in Albuquerque has offered any such hospitality. The guy in the cot 3 feet away talks to me. Buddy. I don't hear him at first. I'm thinking how I'm going to hold on to my wallet when I sleep. Hey, buddy. Hey, I say. Ever been to jail? Now, given his look and the look of most of the men in the place, I'm almost relieved that I can say yes. Yeah, a couple years ago. Walpole? No, just county. How come ask if I've been to Walpole? Your jacket. They give you jackets like that at Walpole. Yours is like mine, see? Pointing to his chest. You sure you never been? Never been. So where'd you get the jacket? County? My mother gave it to me last Christmas. I'm feeling small. Oh, your mom, he nods. So you've been to Walpole, I ask? Yeah, did some time, assault and battery. Didn't do it, though. Got out last month and traveling. How about you? Me too. So where are you from? Massachusetts, Springfield. Back home? Damn. You know a guy named Crazy George, he asks? Jesus, who doesn't know Crazy George? George is a student at AIC who looks more than a little like my new Walpole friend. He's a guy a lot of people buy pot from. He's very tall, wears small grainy glasses on his hairy moon face, dresses in army fatigues, and was walking along with us up State Street on moratorium day, but he didn't go into the welfare office. George might be crazy, but he's not dumb. Now, this is the weirdest thing. I'm driving around the country with a couple of friends and run into a guy in the next cot at a homeless shelter in New Mexico, and he knows a guy I know from back home. And life goes on. About 3 years later, I have a job at the University of Maine at Farmington, where I am the world's worst dorm director. I'm congenitally disorganized. I lose things, keys especially, and this is a death sentence in dorm work. I don't really care if kids smoke pot, and I don't really care if they drink as long as they don't hurt anybody. I tend to side with the underdog, who in this case would be students. I'm told by my supervisor that I suck. I do suck. But I also get to work in the counseling center with returning Vietnam veterans, and this I'm good at. The vets all have horrible stories. More than a few of them wake up screaming in the middle of the night, reliving some bloody scene. One guy, a big Yankees fan, used to give out Yankee hats to little kids in the villages. When one of those little kids in a Yankee hat ran at him holding a live grenade, my client had to kill him. Another guy cut a pregnant girl in half with a burst of his machine gun when she tried to shoot him at close range. I see a lot of vets in the counseling center. There's a knock on my dorm room door. It's late. One of the vets stands in front of me and asks if he and his buddies can use one of the rooms in the basement for a party. No problem, I say. When? Maybe next Saturday? Just let me know, I say. And then I pause. Something feels funny to me. I'm not sure what it is. A very weird tingle. You look kind of familiar. I say this very tentatively. The vet steps back. He looks me over, up and down. He waits a few seconds. Yeah, you too. I think he's Crazy George from back home. Tall, army fatigues, granny glasses, but he doesn't have enough moon face. In my head, I run through all the people I know, all the places I've been, and nothing comes up for sure. Finally, I ask, ever been to New Mexico? Yeah. Albuquerque? Yeah. Christ House Arrest? He goes, yeah. Yeah. He stretches the word into 3 syllables. And then he bursts out, holy shit, you're the guy who ain't been to Walpole. Says, Jesus, how you been? So we do a quick uncomfortable hug. I tell him I'm doing pretty well, that I went back to school, finished, went off to grad school, came back here to Maine for this job. Where'd you go after Albuquerque, I ask. But I take a look at him again, and I know. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. G. Michael Dobbs has been cursed with a love with words, stories, and ideas since junior high school. While he may have chosen a more profitable endeavor, he has had fun. What other career would have given him the chance to interview his heroes, such as Vincent Price, Clayton Moore, and Jack Mercer? The managing editor of Reminder Publications, the former co-owner and editor of 2 magazines, a radio talk show host, and a college instructor, Dobbs wasn't born in Springfield, but adopted it as his hometown at an early age.
Thank you. And thank you, Rick, for dropping the F-bomb of the evening. My subject matter won't allow me to drop an F-bomb, as you're going to see, but I appreciate the fact that someone did. When you realize that you are closer to the end of your life than the beginning, memories blur just a bit. I really don't remember my first kiss with my first girlfriend. However, I should say, I remember my first kiss with my wife of 36 years, who's sitting right over there. Yeah, she needs the applause, I can tell you. I barely remember getting my driver's license. I know I had a draft card, but I don't recall signing up for the draft. But I remember the day my mom took me to the Springfield Central Library to get a library card. It was a momentous occasion for me. I was just in the first grade. It was the first step of being someone on your own. Now, by the way, she would not let me keep the library card. I had a perfectly fine Donald Duck wallet that I would have appreciated putting it in. I didn't have anything in the wallet except, of course, my prized membership card to the Wiki Wacky Cloud Club. And if any of you remember that, oh, Rick, he's the man of the hour. Now, I used this library card to check out a book from the children's room by Thornton W. Burgess. And I bet most of you have never heard of him. Yet, at the height of his popularity, he was one of the most well-known authors for children in the country. And for a time, he lived here in Springfield before moving to a small house in Hamden. Now, as a kid, I loved the Burgess books because they told stories of anthropomorphized animals such as Peter Rabbit. Burgess was an ardent naturalist, and his books reflected his concerns for the environment. And the wonderful illustrations by Harrison Cady were the perfect accompaniment. Now, in 1961, my family lived here in Springfield at 104 Navajo Road in 16 acres. We were, by some reason, an NBC family, and Channel 22 was constantly on in our house. Each night there was a routine of watching the local and national news, as well as a talk show entitled Western Massachusetts Highlights. And one evening, Thornton Burgess was interviewed by Tom Colton. I don't remember seeing it, but my mom did. When Burgess said during the interview that he liked meeting his readers, my mom thought she would call him and arrange an appointment. Now, in my head, the whole thing seemed surreal, although I had no idea of what that meant as a first grader. All I knew is that I was going to meet the author of my favorite books. Maybe. Burgess, by that time, had moved from Springfield and permanently was relocated to Hamden, where he lived in a small cottage. His writing studio was next door. My mom had my brother and I stay in our 1955 Buick when she parked in front of the studio on that fateful day. She said she wanted to meet Burgess first and see what he was like. Her reaction was because of Captain Kangaroo. A year or so before, my mom and dad had brought the two of us to Mountain Park in Holyoke to meet Captain Kangaroo, who then was one of the most popular stars of the kids' television universe. We stood in a long line, I do remember this, and the captain shook our hand and someone next to him gave us a small photo. That was my first brush with celebrity. Mom was not happy. She thought the captain should have spent a little time with each child. She didn't want a similar experience with Burgess. She came to get us and ushered us into his writing studio. The room had several large picture windows overlooking a fast-moving stream. That, Burgess said, was Laughing Brook, the body of water that was a central location for so many of his stories. Now, of course, he used Laughing Brook in stories that he had written well before moving to Hamden. I didn't realize that. For me, it was an awe-inspiring moment. I recall that he pointed to a small building on an adjacent knoll and said it had been his writing studio, but he could not longer make it up the hill. The meeting was pleasant. We bought 2 autographed books. He told us he signed the books when his arthritis allowed him to. I was very happy to have my own copy of The Adventures of Grandfather Frog. and I still have the book. In 1965, I remember reading his obituary in the newspaper. It was the first time I experienced the death of a person that I knew, even in a very small way. Burgess is not remembered in the way as Dr. Seuss, Springfield's other great children's author. No one is selling licensing rights to his books or characters. There is no merchandise. Aside from a Japanese anime series for television, there has been no film adaptations of his work. Some of his books are still in print, but many are not and are seen as collectibles. His two wonderful writing studios were destroyed by the Massachusetts Audubon Society that gained control of his property. It was his wish to see an animal sanctuary, an education center there, and for a while that wish was fulfilled. But eventually the Audubon Society abandoned it. The Hillside Studio was left to fall apart out of neglect, while the one I visited as a child was converted into a tool shed. The walls of the room overlooking Laughing Brook were removed. In his hometown of Sandwich, Burgess is remembered through the work of the Thornton W. Burgess Society. They maintain a wonderful nature center there called Greenbrier, and if you're on the Cape, the next time you should go to Greenbrier. It's great. They have a jelly kitchen. It's the truth. I don't know what jelly and Burgess have to do with one another, but they have a jelly kitchen. However, here in Springfield, there is nothing. But there are older people like me who may not be able to have total recall on matters, who remember the simple pleasure of reading books about animals written by a man who lived just minutes away. Thank you.
I have the pleasure of introducing my friend who put this thing together. Those of us who know her love her dearly, and this is a wonderful thing. So Becky Lartigue is a professor of English at Springfield College and the organizer of Springfield Stories. In 2003, she and her husband moved to Springfield, not knowing what a grinder was. When she learned, she was a bit disappointed. She loves Cheerios, personal letters, medieval literature, and her supportive husband, Dave. Becky Lartigue.
I want to thank all of tonight's writers for sharing their stories with us, and this wonderful audience. Thanks so many of you for coming out on a weeknight, a work night, to listen to us. So thank you. I'm your last reader. We hadn't wanted a pit bull. A few years ago, though, after we finished mourning our dog Bebo, we wanted to have a dog again. We were committed to adopting from a shelter, and if you live in Springfield, your choices there are primarily pit bulls and chihuahuas. The first dog of our marriage had been a chihuahua, an irreplaceable little fellow, round as a potato, named Spud, so chihuahuas were out. This whole act of choosing a dog was still novel to me. I grew up in Louisiana, out in the country with hardly any neighbors, down a washboard dirt road that dead-ended on our land, and where people tended to leave no longer wanted dogs. Most Powell family dogs were acquired that way, one of them so skittish that for years she ate at our house and slept in our garage, never coming near anyone except for my slow-moving father, once bumping his hand with her cold, wet nose. But my husband and I don't live on a dead-end country road where people dump dogs. We live on Irvington Street. So we'd been looking at the shelter's websites for a couple months. The problem was that most of the dogs that seemed like potentially good candidates kept getting snapped up before we'd shut down our computer and found our keys to go meet them. Yeah. And so my husband and I finally decided, it was his idea, we'd just go to the shelter the next weekend, meet a bunch of dogs, keep an open mind, and see what happened. This had largely been our approach to house hunting when we moved to Massachusetts from Illinois 12 years ago. The realtor showed us a lot of houses, and we did our best each time to imagine ourselves living there. So we met some dogs, and we really liked Cappy. He'd been found with tags that declared his name Capone, but when his family could not be found, the shelter staff had wanted to give him a name with fewer tough guy associations. Black and white coat with white socks and an asymmetrical stripe down his face, and Yes, pit bull, mixed with who knows what. But he was fully grown and potty trained, and he did truly seem mellow and easygoing. We filled out the paperwork. Green kerchief around his neck, he sat in the back seat of the car on the drive home, looking out the windows, taking in the city. We went to the pet supply and bought a bed and crate to fit him. He seemed so big to us then. Our previous dog had been a low-to-the-ground pug-beagle mix, some 25 pounds. Cappy was 50-plus pounds of solid dog, chest like a boat's keel. And when he yawned and his tongue curled, you could see all the great big teeth in his maw. Well, I won't deny that the idea of owning a pit bull intimidated us. And we were committed to being good dog owners, going to obedience school. But the start of the next round of classes was weeks away. And those first few days of Cappy's adjustment at home weren't easy. He was well enough behaved in the house, didn't jump, didn't bark, and wouldn't sit on the furniture without an invitation. But in the yard, he would tear around with crazy energy, looping around the trees and shrubs like those rodeo horses that race around barrels, almost sideways with speed. Since our former dog had been on in years and quite sedate, we hoped that what we were seeing in Cappy was just the energy level of a younger dog. We feared, though, that maybe it was his breed. We'd watched our share of the dog whisperer and believed that exercise should help. A tired dog was a good dog, everyone said. So I committed to walking Cappy, morning and evening, blocks and blocks. Irvington to Sumner to White, White to Larkspur to Dorset, Dorset to Sumner, back to Irvington. 30-minute walks, 45-minute walks, hour walks. None of it was helping. No matter how long we walked, he still ended up in the yard, wild and crazed. He was restless, unable to calm himself down. And yet, there was the morning he was chewing sticks in the yard. Somehow he got a shard of wood wedged between his two molars across the very roof of his mouth. And he stood still and let me stand beside him, speaking more calmly than I indeed felt, and allowed me to pry open his jaw and reach into the unknown for that stick. And he kindly did not close his teeth on my hand. But the walks weren't working. My husband and I felt like failures, like we weren't what he needed. We even considered the unthinkable, taking him back to the shelter, knowing this could mean the end for him. After all, he'd been there for months, overlooked all that time. There must be something wrong with him, something beyond our skills to handle. Finally, we reached one of the shelter's volunteer dog trainers by phone. We told her what we'd been trying, and she broke it to us. We were doing it all wrong. We were overstimulating him. When you walk a dog around a new area, she explained, he assumes he has to be in charge of all of it, all the parts of East Forest Park that we were showing him, blocks and blocks and blocks. I remembered every time I'd been tired in a foreign country, surrounded by unfathomable sounds and unfamiliar sights, and I understood. So we followed her advice, started walking much shorter loops in our neighborhood, just around the same block a couple of times, and it was like magic. The freak out ceased. Cappy was calm, at ease. He did well in obedience school, and he knows our routines now. We usually walk him right at 5 when my husband gets off work. Almost always we make the same loop we started walking after talking to that trainer, past this neighbor and that, and past empty houses that have been for sale for months, and also past the foreclosed houses in their own limbos, as forlorn-looking as dogs on a shelter website. Dave and I don't know all of our neighbors' names, but everyone we see regularly on our walks knows Cappy. The woman at CVS who lives a couple blocks over, the family of Sophie who barks at him from behind her chain-link fence as we round her corner, the family of Ruby the husky who likes to rest in a patch of dirt by the flower beds, and my favorites, the kids on Eaton Street, who gleefully call, "Cappy!" and come running in their flip-flops, holding popsicles to scratch his butt and let his tail beat their dusty knees. "What kind is he?" some people will ask when we pass them on the sidewalk. We tell them as Cappy wags his whole rear end at them, he's a pity. Sometimes their faces give the same look that I get from time to time when new acquaintances in Western Mass ask me where I live. I live in Springfield, I say. But other times, the passersby smile and name all the pities they've loved and talk about how much the breed has to offer, about what good family dogs they make and how loyal they are. They talk about how pities don't deserve the reps that they get. Like how sometimes people hear I live in Springfield and their faces brighten and they ask, oh, which neighborhood? And then tell me what school was theirs, or which is their favorite library branch, or how much they love Bueno Isano, or Faux Saigon, or the Bing. We didn't think we wanted a pit bull. And when I was younger, I never imagined myself living in a city instead of the country. We'd heard the stories, and we almost didn't see for ourselves. I've never been happier to have been wrong. Thank you.